and the judges can now introduce themselves.
Thank you very much, and congratulations for being here. I know it's a lot of hard work, so again, we're excited to talk to you today. My name is Ali Khan. I am an attorney in Chicago, as well as an alum of the program representing Illinois at the national competition in 1982.
My name is Ben Glickman. I'm an attorney with the California Attorney General's Office. Also an alum of the program. I represented California at the national finals way back in 1995. So congratulations on making it here, and
Hi, I'm Dan Taubman. I'm a senior judge on the Colorado Court of Appeals in Denver. I'm not an alumnus of the program, but I've worked with you people for a long time, and I'm always glad to judge students who know that there is a mountain time zone.
Please introduce yourselves.
I'm Lauren Jensen.
I'm Jules Pitsley.
I'm Amy Murdoch.
I'm Amadea Vira, and we're Unit 3 from Sheridan High School, and our mentors are Kim Ferguson and Mike Thomas.
Great. So again, great to have you here. And as I'm sure is no surprise, we'll be doing questions to you today. So there is nothing I dread so much as the division of the Republic into two great parties, each arranged under its leader and in opposition to each other. What issues led to the formation of the original political parties? To what extent have those issues persisted in American political party? What are the advantages and disadvantages of a unified or divided government? Maybe again.
In President Washington's farewell address, he warned that political parties will become potent engines by which unprincipled men will subvert the power of the people and destroy the engines which have lifted them to unjust dominion. Despite this, political parties formed before the ratification of the Constitution.
To illustrate, Federalists supported a strong national government empowered by the Constitution. Particularly, James Madison stated in Federalist 51, "You must first enable the government to control the governed, and in the next place, oblige it to control itself." In contrast, the Anti-Federalists supported a weak central government and an agricultural-based economy.
They argued that the Constitution did not protect the personal liberties and needed a Bill of Rights. George Mason stated, "There is no declaration of any kind for preserving the liberty of the press or the trial by jury in civil cases, nor against the danger of standing armies in time of peace."
Also, Thomas Jefferson stated, "The pursuits of agriculture are the surest road to the pursuits of agriculture are the surest road to affluence and best preservative of morals." Furthermore, Alexander Hamilton stated during the election of 1800, "If we must have an enemy at the head of the government, let it be one who will not involve our party in the disgrace of his bad measures."
Additionally, polarization of political parties remains today. In the 1800s, Thomas Jefferson's Nation Gazette and the Federalist-leaning New York papers, such as the Independent Journal, catered to specific political parties similar to CNN and Fox News today.
For example, liberal-leaning CNN released a misleading video clip of Nick Sandmann, a conservative. As a result, Sandmann was attacked on social media by those with opposing political views. Sandmann even expressed that a person demanded he be denied admission to college because their views did not align.
Further, there have been issues regarding nationalism since the 1800s. To illustrate, President Biden denies the existence of a migrant crisis, yet his border officials disagree.
For instance, Brandon Judd, president of the National Border Patrol Council, states, "We do not have the resources to stop cartels from bringing in illegal aliens and drugs. Therefore, we are in a crisis."
Moreover, there are advantages and disadvantages of a unified government. For example, Rachel Caulfield, a political science professor at Drake University, stated, "Unified governments clarify policy priorities of the majority party and enhance a common understanding of what the party organization stands for."
Furthermore, a unified government makes it easier to implement party policies and pass bills. For instance, after the 2016 election, the Republican Party dominated Congress and the White House. In President Trump's first year in office, he passed 117 bills and made steps towards repealing the Affordable Care Act and other Democratic policies.
However, after the 2020 election, Democrats control Congress and President Biden has already signed 38 executive orders. On the other hand,
A unified government leads to a lack of representation for the other party.
For example, President Biden passed a $1.9 trillion COVID relief fund with no support from Republican Congress members. Further, an NPR poll found that Republicans only have a 28% approval rating on how they're handling their job in Congress.
On the contrary, an advantage of a divided government is it utilizes checks and balances by ensuring one party does not dominate another. In 1861, Southern Congressmen tried to pass the Corrin Amendment. However, due to distrust from the North, the amendment did not reach the required two-thirds vote of Congress.
Conversely, a disadvantage is that political parties divide the nation. To illustrate, Democrats support higher taxes, but Republican U.S. Representative Nancy Mace expressed, "I can't think of a worse idea than to raise taxes in the middle of a pandemic."
Further, citizens are judged with their affiliation with political parties. For example, the 7% of BLM protests that turned violent caused a negative generalization for all the protests, and Republicans were categorized as radical due to the riot at the Capitol building.
Fighting against the division among the people, President Abraham Lincoln said, "A house divided against itself cannot stand." We are now ready to take your questions.
Great, thank you very much. Let me ask you this. Would the country be more democratic and perhaps less partisan if we mandated the president and vice president had to be from different parties? Whether you agree or disagree, please explain.
Before the
12th Amendment?
Before the 12th Amendment, the runner-up for presidency was the vice president, so that, therefore, they were from different parties. But after the 12th Amendment, they changed it so that the president runs with the vice president in order to make them from the same party and make them work together.
Along with what my colleague has to say, it can be seen where in Marbury v. Madison, there was originally 6 justices on the Supreme Court, so that way they were forced to compromise. However, they changed this to an odd number due to the lack of compromise.
In addition to what my colleagues are saying, I do not think it would make the country more democratic if they both ran together. If they had to be from different parties, because then it would be really hard to get anything done, as there would be so much disagreement between the two of them.
Also, George Washington saw this in his own cabinet in the beginning because Alexander Hamilton was a Federalist and Jefferson was an anti-federal or a Democratic Republican, and he saw opposition in his cabinet, and Jefferson even resigned.
So one of the criticisms of the current system is that it limits the ability for third parties to gain traction or to get elected. Do you agree that that's a problem? And if so, what solutions would you propose to increase the ability of third parties to succeed?
It was seen in the election of 1992 where the last third-party candidate was able to go to the presidential debate. And
That was Ross Perot also.
Yes, and Abraham Lincoln is the only president who ran third-party and was able to become president.
Furthermore, an example of a multi-party system is Israel, where they have 13 parties represented in 120 seats, while America only has 2 represented in 435 seats in the House of Representatives. And so that makes it hard for third parties to gain any leverage because they are not represented anywhere, and they must receive at least $5,000 from every state in order to be invited to the debates.
So our panel would propose that they wouldn't have to have $5,000 in every state in order to have go to a press conference, because that would help out the third parties.
They also have to have 20% of votes to be invited to the presidential
Sorry,
debate.
it's 15%.
Since we have 2 political parties, to what extent would you say that there are differences of opinion within both the Democratic and Republican parties? And is that good or bad?
It can be seen with Roe v. Wade, Obergefell v. Hodges, and Masterpiece Cake Shop versus Colorado Civil Rights Commission, where there was differing opinions between the Republicans and Democrats over issues of abortion, gay marriage, and the rights of gay people.
Also, a great example of it just recently was the storming of the Capitol building within the Republican Party, and then 7% of the BLM riots were violent. So that's an example of a faction within the Democratic Party, and there's also our Principles Pact, which is in the Republican Party, and they raised $13 million to advertise against Trump.
And there's also the Never Trumpsters in the Republican political party, which contributed to that. And there's socialists on the Democrat side, which is a faction of that.
So it can be a negative for there to be factions within a political party. However, it's good that everybody gets to voice their opinion.
However, the majority of Americans do not affiliate with a specific political party. Most are in the middle and they consider themselves moderates. So they tend to vote with the party depending on a major issue such as abortion discussed in Roe v. Wade. And so they have trouble finding parties that support their specific views since we only have two.
And James Madison states in Federalist 10 that factions, or liberty is to factions as heirs to fire, so factions are necessary because that's what makes liberty, according to Madison.
Or they're inevitable.
Yeah, they're inevitable.
Right. Since, this ties into, the political process, especially presidential elections, do you feel, and it's a hot button issue, do you feel that we should still have the Electoral College?
As a citizen of Wyoming, we definitely need the Electoral College because that gives us a voice compared to Colorado that has 55 electoral votes. And California is what I meant to say, sorry. And we have two, and so that definitely gives us a voice because we are so overrepresented by our electoral votes that we need it.
In addition to this, if we go back to the example of Israel, which has a multi-party system, it's really hard for them to elect an executive, whereas for us with our electoral college, we've never not been able to elect a president because even if it's tied, we have systems which can
This can be seen in the election of 1800 with Thomas Jefferson and John Adams tied, but they were able to go to the Electoral College. Also the election of Rutherford B. Hayes, we've always elected a president.
So one of the things you talked about was how the two-party system kind of leads to gridlock, and you mentioned that. Is gridlock inherently bad, or are there benefits to gridlock and the inability to pass legislation?
There are benefits because if one party was able to pass every single law they wanted, it would completely take over the other side. For example, in Federalist 51, James Madison discusses how the only reason one faction won't completely take over like all of the other ones is because of the checks and balances in the government. And so because of the different representation in them, it helps prevent things. As we discussed in our essay, there was the $1.9 trillion COVID relief fund, which passed with zero support from the Republican members of Congress. So right now, with Democrats in power, they were able to do something along those lines. However, I think it's an advantage.
And we also discussed this in our first essay where we argue about kind of majoritarian court cases. Yeah.
Excuse me. Can you tell us about how the political parties differed leading up to the Civil War?
Leading up to the Civil War, I believe it's what President Washington was warning about in his farewell address, because you could see the country completely divided. And so the northern side wanted to end slavery, and the southern side did not want to because of how much it would harm them and their agriculture. And so you could see the division there. And we even had to have the Three-Fifths Compromise before that. And so I believe it was inevitable that there was going to be a Civil War or disagreement about that.
Another example of this is the Corwin Amendment.
Sorry to cut you off, but we get that time.
Thank you so much, and let's give a round of applause to the. Now the judges have some feedback for you.
Well, first of all, again, congrats for being here. I know it's not easy, so I really appreciate the effort and work you put into being here and studying up on these questions. In terms of feedback, I love the way you all participated. If someone got something wrong, you jumped in the correct information, demonstrating as a collective. You all someone on the team had the right answer. And, I personally appreciate that because, to me, it is about everybody participating, lifting up your teammates. So I think that was great. I think, you cited a lot of contemporary things, President Trump, President Biden. And those are the things that stood out with me that I really like. So great job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll go ahead and go. Yeah, so I thought the prepared remarks were good. I liked the starting off with Washington's farewell address. That's obviously directly responsive to the question. My one overarching comment would be to please kind of slow down. It's very hard to follow everything. You girls go quickly. I think you just wanted to get in 6 minutes worth of information into your 4-minute presentation. But you answered the question. You had some interesting support. Some support that's not from the textbook. You mentioned that the Drake professor. You mentioned the contemporary issues, which is good. On the Q&A, again, I echo the comments. I appreciate that you are also eager to participate. We all did participate and help each other out when appropriate. The one constructive thing I would give there is sometimes it seemed like you had supporting evidence or an example, but you didn't necessarily to make it clear how it related to the question or to the answer you're providing. So whenever you have supporting evidence, just make sure you're going that next step to say, and this answers your question because, just to make it clear how it supports the answer, and to show that you're really appropriate question. Like one of the examples I have is the Marbury example regarding the first question and the multi-party Israel example. Just make sure that you're tying those back into the question. But overall, I thought you guys did a nice job.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I think you did a very nice job too. I was impressed by the historical information that you shared with us, beginning with Washington's farewell address, talking about the reasons for the creation of the original parties, including the role of the national government and Thomas Jefferson's view about the virtues of an agrarian economy. Might have mentioned the other side's view of the virtues of a merchant economy or an industrial economy. And you might have mentioned their different views about supporting Great Britain or France. Excuse me. But otherwise, your historical discussion, I thought was very good. You had good discussions of the advantages and disadvantages of unified government. You did mention that President Biden passed the COVID relief bill. He signed it, but it was actually passed by Congress, although it was done, as you indicated, on a one-party basis, just with support from the Democrats. When I asked you about the differences among the third party, within the parties, you mentioned the Never Trumpsters and the Socialists and the Democratic Party. Those were good examples. You might have mentioned in the past the Tea Party members of the Republican Party, or there were more conservative Democrats called Blue Dog Democrats, and those would have been helpful as well. And you mentioned Roe v. Wade, Obergefell, and Masterpiece Cake. I'm not sure how they fit into the question about the differences within the parties, but I especially like your mentioning Masterpiece Cake, nevertheless, because I wrote the opinion in our court that the Supreme Court reviewed when it decided the case a few years ago. And then in further answers to our questions, I like the fact that you mentioned Federalist 10, which is an important Federalist paper, and that you referred to the 1800 election and the election of Rutherford B. Hayes. So I thought you showed a really good knowledge of all of the different aspects of the question. So good job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.